Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Devy to Dynasty Film Room podcast. My name is Matt Jackson. I'm your host tonight, and with me, as always, I've got my co-host Matt Cooper.
What's up?
And Matthew Rupert.
How's it going, guys?
Guys, it has been a while. I feel like I haven't been on the show in forever. How the heck have you guys been?
We've been good, man. Holding down the fort. It has been a hot minute, but good to have you back.
You know, I meant to tell you guys, I was playing Titanic, fake Titanic on a cruise ship. Pre the sinking, obviously, but me and Alyssa were doing the I'm flying Jack pose on the front of the Titanic ship during the cruise ship. So we were playing around when you guys were doing your old podcast, the podcast last week. But I listened; it was great. You guys did a fantastic job holding down the fort. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. We shouted you out 2 weeks in a row. We said Matt Jackson's off being a good husband, so celebrating your wife's birthday and then an anniversary. So,
wife's birthday and anniversary are two dates that you can't forget. You've got to celebrate those, and I appreciate you guys for the flexibility and understanding of that.
You got it. Hopefully, you guys some pictures of the Jack and Rose pose.
Yeah. I was of course Rose. I wasn't Jack. I wanted to be the one that she was holding. But guys, we had quite an interesting week of football this week, and I figured there ain't no better way to start than diving right on into it. And of course, as always, just as our listeners know, we start with the college football stuff first. And I'll throw this question to you first, Cooper. Was there anything from the college slate of football this week that kind of jumped out to you?
Yeah, so I had a wedding on Saturday that my wife and I went to, and it was real special. Some students that had been involved in our ministry, actually a guy that I had led to Christ, was getting married. So that was really, really fun. So all that to say, I only caught like a little bit of the 12 p.m. games live. And one of those that I watched, of course, like the biggest game on the 12 p.m. slate was Penn State versus Ohio State. And Drew Aller just continues to look rough. That was my big takeaway. It's like, I don't know. I'm 18 for 42. So he throws 42 passes, completes less than 50% of them, still didn't hit 200 yards passing. And that's been a trend. It's not like it's just 1 week. I know Ohio State has a tough defense, but they put up 12 points. That's not great. And I know like he doesn't have a great O-line. He doesn't have great wide receivers. It's not just him, but it's been a disappointing start to the year for Drew Aller. And I don't know, like, what are we doing with him? If you have him, are you looking to sell off of his next big game? Are you trying to hold, weather the storm? I mean, he's got another year after this one to try to figure it out before he hits the draft. What are you doing with Drew Aller?
I mean, the biggest thing that you got to do with Drew Aller, I think right now, you never sell during a slump, right? I mean, that's 101 of fantasy football. You sell high, you buy low. And right now, I think Drew Aller stock is low. Anybody that's been watching Drew Aller, I mean, his accuracy is all over the place. He's not playing well. He's not putting up the statistical performances that you drafted him to do. He's still got another year. I think you're almost pigeonholed back into a corner where you have to hold on to him another year. I don't think you can rightfully sell him and get close to what you had to pay for him a couple months ago. I mean, right now you're kind of forced to hold on to him a little bit.
Yeah, his mechanics are really bad right now. He seems to throw off balance a ton, off platform, but not in the good way of like, oh man, he's making all these great off platform throws. He does not look comfortable in the pocket, and the offensive line isn't making that any easier on him. But this is not, I mean, in case anybody's thinking, oh man, I'm going to buy low on Drew Aller, I would not recommend that. I think Devy quarterbacks are a huge risk. We're seeing that. You had to invest a lot to get Drew Aller, and at this moment in time, it does not look like that investment's going to pay off. I think, like Jackson said, if you hold, it could turn around. And so that's what I would do if I had any shares. But I would not be buying the dip. And yeah, I think there's a real chance. You said don't sell low. Like, there's a real chance that if you don't sell low, you're going to end up holding the bag and get nothing, because I'm not sure that I see an NFL quarterback here.
And I guess what I was saying, that almost feels like the risk that you have to take a little bit, though, doesn't it? I mean, because it feels like to me you're backed into a corner when it comes to all your Drew Aller shares.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, sunk cost is like, I spent all this on him, so I got to get at least that much back if I'm going to sell. That can be a bad way of thinking. That can get you into trouble with Dynasty. But I do think that in this case, the upside is there with the scarcity at the position, and Devy leagues pretty much are all super flex leagues in my experience. So I think the upside is there enough that you have to hold and hope things get turned around. Because
let me just say this too: like, I don't think you're ever going to get what you paid for Drew Aller a couple months ago. Like, I don't think his stock is ever going to get to that point again. So it's not that I'm saying to hold until you can get that, because I don't think it's going to happen. But hold until you can at least get more than you can get now, which I think potentially will happen.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what you could get. Like, if you threw Drew Aller on the block, would anybody even make an offer? If you went to somebody and said, "Hey, I'll give you Drew Aller if you give me," oh man, what's a player that I could like? I would be targeting an NFL player. Let's say I'm contending and I need a quarterback, and I say, "Hey, can I send you Drew Aller for Derek Carr?" Yeah. And now I get a starting quarterback that I can plug into my lineup and feel decent about every week. I think you probably still could get that done. Like, I don't think Drew Aller's value has totally bottomed out. So I think it's worth investigating. But if you can't get at least a reasonable starting quarterback on the NFL side, I would probably hold.
Yeah, for sure. While we're talking about bad quarterbacks, my biggest takeaway, I watched the UNC Virginia game. And man, whew, let me tell you, and I'm going to throw this one to Rupert for a second, man. Rupert, when you think about, when you're looking at the NFL upside of guys, when you hear about guys coming out into the NFL draft, when you guys hear guys that have NFL stock, what are the two names that you hear?
Definitely Caleb Williams and Drake May.
Caleb Williams and Drake May. You talk to anybody right now, it's Caleb Williams and Drake May, right? Those are two are neck and neck. Man, when I watched that Virginia game, I'm right there with you, Cooper, and I know I was a little late to the party because you've been all over this train for a few weeks now. But Drake May looks abysmal from a Devy standpoint right now. I mean, he had to miss. I mean, I was counting at least 4 wide open touchdown passes in that game. Guys that were running streaks wide open down the field, and he just airmailed it over their heads. His accuracy was all over the place. His stat line, I think he ended the game 50% completion percentage against a 1-5 football team. I mean, we had this problem with him a few weeks ago, right? Not putting up the stats against teams that he should put the stats up against. I mean, that problem's not going away.
Yeah. I mean, I said it a while ago. Like you said, it's not that I hate Drake May or I think he's a terrible player. I just think he got crowned too early. He's been the Devy 102 almost unquestioned since early last season. And I said, like, man, he hasn't played anybody. And then coming into this year, like, he's got no Josh Downs and he's got a new offensive coordinator. And I've just had questions. I've had questions about is he really worth what you have to pay to get him right now? Because people have been treating him like he is a locked-in, guaranteed top 5 draft pick at the position. And he still might be. But I think that's not a lock at this point. And, I don't think he's a terrible player. I think there's a lot of traits there to work with in terms of his arm talent, in terms of his mobility. I don't know. Like, I think, like you said, that the accuracy is all over the place. I think the mechanics are a little bit all over the place. He holds the ball for too long sometimes. And he can get away with that in college, but it might be a rough transition for him to the NFL.
When guys are faster than the NFL, I mean, it doesn't get easier when you take that next step. Guys are faster. The windows are smaller. I mean, guys don't, outside of Josh Allen, who was an anomaly, and Rupert, I know you can probably agree with me there. Josh Allen was an anomaly when it comes to accuracy. Guys don't go to the NFL and get more accurate. So, I mean, you've got to fix these problems right now, or you're in for a world of problems.
For sure.
So, while we're still on college football, are there anything else that jumped out to you before we move on to the NFL, Cooper?
Yeah, so I mentioned last week, I believe it was, that Dante Moore was somebody who was a stock down for me, the true freshman quarterback at UCLA. And I guess Chip Kelly agreed with me because he benched him And you don't love to see that. And then not only that, but the guy he benched him for came in, threw for over 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. They won 42-7. It was their first conference win. So that's not great. But I will say, we just talked about how big of a risk Devy quarterbacks are. I mean, you talked about how much you had to invest to get a guy like Aller or May, and here we are, and they don't feel like sure things at all for what you had to invest to get them. But I think Dante Moore, because he's a freshman and you can get in early and he struggled and he just got benched, you may be able to buy him right now without it costing you everything. And I think, he's still got, even if he stayed benched for the rest of this year, which I don't think will happen, he's still got 2 full college seasons after this one to put it together. And I think the traits are there. So Dante Moore is a guy that I would be very interested in seeing if I could buy the dip on now that he's been officially benched.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's a great call. One of those buy low guys that I think can end up paying off for you. Another guy that I'm buying right now, when it comes to college guys, and I know this seems a little blasphemous being an Ohio State fan, but I'm taking the buy on Michigan's J.J. McCarthy. I watched that game, Michigan versus Michigan State, and J.J. McCarthy plus pulled a Baker Mayfield this season, and he woke up this entire season feeling dangerous. I mean, this dude looks lights out phenomenal. I mean, can extend the pocket well. I mean, he's already a mobile quarterback, throws well on the run. He had one pass, threaded the needle over a guy's like left ear, over the helmet. Dude wasn't even looking. Perfect pass for a touchdown. I mean, it's just a leader that you want as a quarterback. He's an accurate quarterback, doesn't make many mistakes. I mean, a true leader in the pocket. He's somebody that I think is going to cost you a little bit, but for me, I mean, he's as blasphemous as it is to say coming from an Ohio State fan. I think I'm moving him close to being inside my top 5 Devy quarterbacks right now.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, the big question in the past has been his passing ability, because he's got that Konami code ability with his legs, which obviously we are very enticed by for fantasy football. But his completion percentage this year has jumped all the way up to 78%. He's got 18 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions. He's on pace for by far the best passing year of his career. And I mean, seems like week in and week out, he's coming in and putting up big numbers with his arms to go with the mobility that we know that he already has. And so, yeah, it's a stock up for me as well. And I think he can make himself a case for QB3 in this class. I mean, especially, I don't know. There's so many good quarterbacks to talk about, but he's way younger than a guy like Bo Nix or Michael Penix.
Yeah.
He's more mobile than a lot of the other guys that you would look at. And so I think the quarterback class is wide open, more mobile than a guy like Quinn Ewers for sure. So, I mean, you got those 2 guys, Caleb Williams and Drake May, who we talked about looking a little suspect, but there's a lot of names afterwards. And I think J.J. McCarthy has just as good of a case as anyone of being a top 3 quarterback in this class. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
For sure. And I mean, you got teams right now that in the NFL, quarterbacks are getting older. You got teams that need some quarterbacks. I could see more than just those top 2 going in the first round. I mean, I think that's an obvious thing right now. And speaking of the NFL, I think it's time to move on there. When it comes to the NFL slate this week, I'm going to throw this to you, Rupert. What stuck out to you from the NFL slate of games this past Sunday?
Travis Etienne just looks like he's on a different level with his acceleration and burst. The way he's like just flying through holes, getting to the edge, it's just looked different this year. It looks like he's fully recovered from that West Frank injury he had. I've moved him all the way up in my rankings just behind CMC, Brees Hall, and Bijan. I'd probably put him ahead of Kenneth Walker and the rest of the guys. He just looks so good to me. He's in such a great offense. It doesn't seem like Tank Bigsby's any kind of threat to him. So He's a guy I may be looking to inquire about and see if, people have him ranked a little bit lower than some other guys, and see if I can make a move there.
I'm surprised you can put him behind Bijan Robinson when Bijan Robinson's the running back 3 on his depth chart.
That's something else we may have to talk about here.
How crazy was that?
Yeah, I mean, we all know Arthur Smith hates fantasy football.
Yeah.
I wonder if he did that just to spite us. But, I mean, the reports are that Bijan Robinson was sick, that he wasn't feeling well. And I thought there were rules where you got to report that kind of thing, where he's on the injury report, questionable. But, no, we all fired him up with confidence in our starting lineups. And,
dude, I had him going in at least 3 leagues where I'm was 4-1 or 4-2 in, and I heftily got the loss, and I was peeved.
Yeah, but I mean, in all seriousness, from a dynasty perspective, I don't think people are going to be panicked about this. But on the off chance that your league mate is panicked about it, I would send out some offers. I mean, it never hurts. And I'm not saying go send out a low ball. Like, send market value for Bijan Robinson, maybe just a hair below market value for Bijan Robinson, and just see what happens. I mean, this is a guy that I would love to have more shares of, but you couldn't get him without having the 101 this year. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have very many shares. I'd love to get more shares. It never hurts to send out an offer. So,
yeah, for sure. Well, Cooper, I'm going to throw it to you. What stuck out to you about some of the NFL games this Sunday?
Yeah, so I'll start by talking about the Vikings backfield. We talked about this a few weeks ago when the news broke that Cam Akers was traded there, and it was like, okay, what are you doing with this backfield? And I said, I'm selling all of them. I don't want anything to do with any of them. They're both super mediocre, and they're going to be in a timeshare, and you're not going to want to start either one for fantasy football. And it looks like it's playing out exactly like I thought that it would. I mean, you had 10 carries for one guy, 8 carries for the other. Neither one of them is good enough to produce on 8 carries or 10 carries. They're not that guy. So, yeah, I hope that you sold. At this point, I don't know. The actionable advice is if you can still get off anything, get it. But somebody threw Alexander Madison in on a deal for me that I was going to take anyway. And so I was like, sure, now I've got him on my roster. And I don't know. He's basically a roster clogger at this point. I think they both are. So
for sure. I'd like to take a quick ad break from our show today to bring you our fun stat for the day. When Taylor Swift is in attendance, Travis Kelce's yards per catch is 99 yards per game. When Taylor Swift is not in attendance for the Kansas City Chiefs game, Travis Kelce's yards per game dip all the way down to 46.5. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. If Taylor Swift were in a rookie draft with this stat on your fantasy football team, what round would she go in?
I don't know about that, but I wish Travis Kelce got a point for every time that they pan to her on the broadcast, because
100%.
he would be more game breaking than he already is for fantasy football. If he was getting those points, that'd be,
dude, the NFL is eating this up.
a solid 40 points a game just from Taylor Swift broadcast cutaways.
I think it's crazy that he's averaging 50 more yards per game when she's at the game. It's wild.
Yeah, that's kind of a fluky stat. She hasn't been at that many games yet.
I mean, he's looked good the last few games, though. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, if you're on a contending team, if you're going for it, especially in tight end premium leagues, I mean, Travis Kelce is getting up there in age. I mean, you could realistically get him for not having to pay, the mortgage or fantasy roster. I mean, what would you realistically pay for Travis Kelce on a contending team right now?
I'll be honest, I don't feel like that's the case. Everywhere I've tried to buy them, they still want more than a first and a really good young player, or a first and a second, which I may be willing to pay that.
Would you do the first and the second, though?
I would, here's the thing, if you know that you are a top 3 contender and you have a real shot at beating the best team in the league, if Travis Kelce is on your roster. you just can't mortgage the future to buy a 34-year-old player at any position unless you're a real contender. Like, don't do it if you're a pretender. So, like, Rupert and I, we're in a league where we're co-owning, and it's an IDP league. So our defense is stacked, and we've managed to get ourselves to 7-0 somehow. We were the 101 last year. We were dead last, and our offense is still terrible. I mean, we're starting guys every single week that are putting up zeros, and somehow we're still getting wins just because our defense is kind of carrying the team. But if you look at like max points for, we're like middle of the pack. And so we kind of put in an inquiry about Travis Kelce because it's 2 points per reception for tight ends in this league. And the guy said, hey, I want a first-round pick and I want Josh Downs. And, you know, we love Josh Downs. And our first-round pick, like, we're 7-0 right now, but max PF, we're middle of the pack. And, you know, anyway, so it's a situation where we're considering it, but we're not sure if even though we're 7-0, we're not sure if we're real contenders, and we don't want to pull the trigger on buying a Travis Kelce share for a first-round pick plus a really good young player unless we know for sure that we can compete.
You got to be positive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much have the playoffs locked in at that point.
Because, like, I'm not sure that we're one piece away. I'll put it that way. If you think you're one piece away, absolutely. A first and a second or a first and downs, like, I think that's fair value for for the advantage that Travis Kelce brings to your fantasy team, especially in those heavy premium leagues. But it doesn't make sense to do it unless you're sure that you're one piece away from at least having a shot at it. And I feel like our roster has a bunch of holes on it, which is why we haven't pulled the trigger.
For sure. Yeah, I like that take a lot. Well, moving on, continuing with our NFL takes for this last week. I've got a big one, guys. And, of course, I watched, I'm a big fan of the Eagles. You guys know that. And I watched the Eagles-Dolphins game. It was a primetime game, great football game. But, man, did the Eagles win a scripted game? I can't help but feel they won a scripted game a little bit. I mean, 0 penalties whatsoever. I mean, you don't play a football game and not get penalized at all. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen it. There's a whole Twitter thread of all the missed penalty calls in that game. It's ridiculous.
Which I'm sure you could make a thread like that about any team in any game. Like, it's just missed calls are part of the deal. And so I tend to roll my eyes at stuff like that. If anybody did script that game, they didn't do a very good job because it wasn't a very exciting football game. I saw Eagles versus Dolphins, and I was like, man, this could be a really good game. And it was kind of a snooze fest. So if it was
a defensive game a little bit, especially in the second half.
If it was a scripted game, they could have written a better script. That's all I'm saying.
I'll tell you one script that's been interesting to follow, and I don't know if you necessarily want to call it a script or not, but A.J. Brown, what is it, 5 games now of over 125 receiving yards? I mean, where do we have A.J. Brown in our rankings right now? I mean, is he a top 3 wide receiver? Is he top 2? I mean, where do you guys have him?
Yeah, he's number 3 for me. It's JJ, Chase, and then AJ.
Yeah, he's right up there. I mean, I think I would have said at the beginning of this year that I had Lamb over him just because of target competition. But Lamb has really struggled, and the Cowboys offense doesn't look great. So A.J. Brown has clearly passed Lamb for me to that 3 spot. I think from a dynasty perspective, like, you could make an argument for Garrett Wilson, but again, like, you got a whole year right now where A.J. Brown's going to give you way better production. So that's got to factor heavily into your rankings. And I think the only other guy that would have a case would be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't think Amon-Ra St. Brown gets enough respect for what he does, just being a consistent target hog. And I mean, even this week they got blown out. They only put up 6 points as an offense, and he still got you 20+ fantasy points. So I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think him and Lamb and A.J. Brown would be really close for me. And ARSB is younger too. So I think that's a debate that's worth having.
While we're on the topic of wide receivers, what are we doing with Jamison Williams?
Holding and praying. Like, I have a lot of shares because I really liked him as a prospect, and he was falling. Like you could get him late in the first round that year because he was going below Garrett Wilson as he should have been, going below Drake London, going below Treylon Burks, going below Jahan Dotson, Olave, and in some cases Sky Moore. And so you could get him towards the back end of the first. And I had him as my wide receiver 2 in that class, which now looks like a mistake. But I have a decent amount of shares, and I don't know. Positive signs of life last week and then nothing this week. It's frustrating. It's not what I hope to see, but I think you just got to hold at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
Agreed.
Rupert, anything else that jumped out to you about the NFL games this week?
Yeah. A guy that I've come around on that I used to not like at all is George Pickens. He looks like he's just taking his game to a different level this year. The chemistry that he has is just, blown up on the tape. Like the amount of back shoulder catches he's making is pretty ridiculous. He definitely shows like he's a contested catch, acrobatic kind of guy. Like he's always open because he can make those back shoulder catches. And then Deontay Johnson looked good coming back from injury, which was really encouraging to see. So I think like once they can, get a competent offensive coordinator, that Steelers offense can be really fun with those two guys.
So maybe like a rebuild buy if you're out of it, and that those guys might not give you a ton of points this year, but you're hopeful for a lot better next year.
100%.
So it's kind of best case scenario because they're not going to score you a ton of points to hurt your draft pick, but they could rise significantly in value and turn a profit on it next year.
Yep, 100%.
Anything else for you, Cooper, that you saw that stuck out to you, jumped out to you about the NFL games this week?
It was really nice to see Jahmyr Gibbs and JSN finally have breakout games. Obviously, it took injuries for both of those guys, and that might mean that if you're patient, a buy window could open up when David Montgomery comes back and when DK Metcalf comes back, and those guys get relegated kind of back into lesser roles. And people start to panic on them again because people are reactionary and it just happens. Those two guys looked incredible this week. Gibbs in particular, I mean, like over 6 yards a carry, 10 targets. Like he just looked, it was like, man, this is what he could be if they would just use him right. He's so talented. So I don't know. A week ago, everybody was in a huge panic about Gibbs. And I feel like coaches are stubborn. So when Montgomery comes back, it's going to be like the same. Like you're going to see 20 plus Montgomery carries, and Gibbs is going to be relegated to this secondary pass catching role, and people are going to panic again. And as soon as that happens, like I'm sending offers because the dude is just a stud. So,
and that's what I was going to say. I mean, when Montgomery comes back, you're just going to get the panic all over again. So that's going to be your time to buy.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
For sure. I think when I was watching it, one of the biggest takeaways for me, man, those Ravens, I mean, I know I said at the very beginning of the season when we did our predictions about the Super Bowl, I predicted Bengals and Eagles, and that's not looking too great right now. But, man, one of the teams to beat in the AFC right now looks like the Ravens, man. They look solid, put on a thrashing against the Lions on Sunday. Looked phenomenal. I mean, they're not just a running team, a run-first team anymore. I mean, with that new offensive coordinator, they're spreading the ball out more. They run more wide sets. And they can beat you through the air. And Lamar Jackson looks like prime Lamar Jackson all over again, and he looks phenomenal. And I loved every minute of that game.
Yeah, we actually said last week that he did not look like prime Lamar Jackson to us as far as the rushing ability. Like I think he's improved as a passer, and he's certainly still like pretty solid fantasy option. Obviously, as he showed this week, like he's a locked in QB1 in a scarce position. So I'm not saying he's not valuable. I'm not saying that any of that, but the rushing upside to me, he just doesn't look like he has the juice that he used to have. So
Do you think it's the juice or it's just the system though? Because it looks like they're spreading their guys out more, not and trying to take away from Lamar. I mean, Lamar just got that bag, right? He just got paid. So are they trying to keep him from getting hit as many times?
that's probably part of it too. But yeah, I don't like, to me, I think he looks like he's been more cautious. Like when he gets out of the pocket and he starts to scramble, he's looking for an opportunity to slide or to get out of bounds. He's trying not to take those big hits. You're not seeing him try to juke guys out of their shoes as much. You're just seeing him like get the first down, get out of bounds. So I don't know. Like I think he's still a great player. I just don't know that the fantasy upside is what it used to be, where he could be RB1 overall because he's going to break the quarterback rushing record. Like I just don't know that Lamar Jackson is going to be that guy again.
Yeah. From what I saw, he's not looking to run at all. Like where he used to, if his first read or second read isn't there, he immediately takes off. I saw multiple times where, he's still hanging in there and, waiting 3, 4, 5 seconds to find a guy that's open and then throw it to him before taking a hit. I saw that like a handful of times. So I do think he's definitely like not looking to run as much as he used to, which, like you said, kind of limits his upside a bit.
I think he's a better real life quarterback, but he just might be worse for fantasy.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's the perfect way to say it. And this week, fortunately, his pass catchers were actually catching the ball instead of having 7 drops in one game.
Yeah, they looked good.
Zay Flowers looked great.
They looked awesome.
He consistently is looking great. And Addison too.
Yeah.
And then you saw the JSN breakout.
Yeah.
But you know who you're not seeing? Quentin Johnston. I wonder if anybody could have predicted that one. But, he's out there. He's got the snaps now. He's running the routes. But somehow, I guess maybe this is just something that was on his tape as a college guy, but he just doesn't separate much and he doesn't earn targets. And when he does earn targets, he might drop them. And he's clearly being outplayed by Josh Palmer.
Cooper, where could you have found that valuable information on his game tape that would have alluded to him doing some of this kind of stuff?
Probably on this YouTube channel, but no, I mean I'm being silly and I'm being obnoxious. So people who love Quentin Johnston are on here like, I'm never listening to this show again. That guy's a prick. But I don't know, man. Like I just don't know. I try not to say things like this because I'm really like, I want to be respectful of other analysts and I don't know everything and I get plenty of takes wrong. But I do not know what people saw in Quentin Johnston. Every single time I turned on the tape, I just saw a guy that looks like a bust. And people fell in love with him because he's 6'4" and he runs fast. And I just, it's like, I would go as far as to say that if somebody really, now if they're an analytics guy and they thought, hey, the analytics shows that he's going to be good, like that's fine. That's a different process. But if somebody studies film and they looked at it and they said, hey, I think Quentin Johnston's going to be a stud, I would question their ability to evaluate wide receivers because I did not see that and don't see that now in the NFL. And
it's Tamorian Terry all over again.
People always fall in love with the tall, fast guy. So let it be a lesson. It's going to happen again. It happened with Treylon Burks. It happened with Quentin Johnston. It might happen again this year with some guys, Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette. Like there's a lot of tall guys in this class. So you really got to get in there and figure out who can actually run routes. And, that's the most important thing. Who can run routes?
I think what you're speaking to is the importance of developing your own process of what's important when you're watching film and figuring out what guys do that well and tuning into those guys. I mean, if it's not us, tune into somebody that knows what they're talking about and can weed through the weeds in this sticky process.
Yeah, and follow the trends of the NFL. Like, what is the archetype that the NFL is looking for that's translating to fantasy? Right now, at the wide receiver position, like these big, tall, big-bodied guys are out of style. Like the ones that are producing are the they're not necessarily undersized. Like you look at a Garrett Wilson, he's 6 foot, 190 some. Like he's not tiny, but he's not this big 6'4" hulking guy. Like he's small enough that he can get in and out of his breaks, and he's quick, and he gets open, and he creates separation. Like that's the archetype right now, and you want that because especially all of our leagues basically have transitioned to PPR being kind of the gold standard. And if it's a full PPR league, it doesn't matter if you're catching like if you catch 3 balls and they're all 20, 30 yards downfield, like that's a respectable fantasy performance. But these guys that are producing more consistently are catching 9, 10 balls almost every week because they just get open and they get passes. And even if they're like, if a guy catches 1 pass for 1 yard, like that's a point, And so I think like these guys that are high target earners, that's what you want to look for. And so that naturally is going to be a detriment to some of these big bodied contested catch guys.
We used to shy away from the slot wide receiver build, and now that's the meta in fantasy football that you want. Those guys that can get open and catch passes. I mean, it's the NFL, it's the world that we live in fantasy football today.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, we are running out of time. We've gone over showtime. So why don't we go ahead and wrap up? Cooper, why don't you tell the people where they can find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Devy2Dynasty FR. That's the number 2, not TO, at Devy2Dynasty FR. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, this is a YouTube channel as well. And so youtube.com/@Devy2Dynasty FR. It's where you can find the video version of this podcast and lots of other film breakdowns that we do on the channel, going over strengths and weaknesses, who we draft, who we wouldn't draft. So, yeah, you can find us there.
What about you, Rupert?
You can find me at Matthew Rupert FF on Twitter/X.
Awesome. And you guys can find me on Twitter at DevyMatt. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to the podcast if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get all those exciting film breakdowns to help you know who to draft, as we've already discussed on the show. Make sure you guys tune into the show. We'll be back again next Tuesday, 7:30, same time, breaking down more fantasy football content for you guys. Look forward to seeing you guys then. But until next time, peace out.
See you.